So, Lisa, the question is, the next question is really, what can shelters be doing that they're not doing? And every shelter is different, right? Some are doing a better job than others. But what are you seeing is lacking in so many places that, there's no silver bullet but would help?
Right. I the best quality of life I have seen for dogs in the South is at a rural shelter in Mississippi. Their build is nothing to look at. Nothing. They don't have air conditioning and it is hot when it is hot. I've seen their staff take 5-gallon buckets of ice from the front of that building and hauling it to dogs in the back. Their entire focus all day, every single day, is quality of life for the dogs. And they recognize that that's individual for every dog. So you'll go in there and you'll see people on their lunch break sitting in a kennel, just being in the space, not imposing themselves on the dog and what they think the dog should do, but seeing what the dog wants to do. There are certain things that they can do within reason. One thing that we taught them to do was to play music, and not just any music, right? So they started playing classical music in there, and for one specific group of dogs, well, they figured out it trickled through the whole building. One day the music went off and the dog started barking mid-afternoon, and they were like, why is everybody barking? And they figured out it was simply because the music was off. And it's not rock and roll music, it's not classic rock, it's soothing music. We talk about classical music or spa music, things like that, things to bring that excited, overstimulated energy down just a little bit. Lowering the lighting can help with that. But again, more mental stimulation is what is lacking across the board. We think throwing dogs in play groups is the answer. It's not. Oftentimes, those dogs are so overstimulated just from the environment, they get into fights just because they're overstimulated. But you get them out of there, you give them time to decompress, and they're completely fine with other dogs. But they get labeled because of the situation. So when you can focus more on the individual dog and their needs, and honestly, Maslow's hierarchy in human psychology is the foundation that we kind of all can look towards, but they have one for dogs, and that bottom rung for dogs is, can I feed you safely? Can I house you safely? Can I take care of your very basic needs? And once we can get that taken care of, then we can move on to other things. But if we can't do those very basic things safely, and the dogs feel at least some sense of calm about it and get used to routine, they're not going to be able to be in homes.
And so one of the things you said, I think this is common sense, and I know that Aubrie and Alan and I have talked about this. The simple act of getting them out of a traditional shelter environment, even if you're just taking them to a foster home, probably works for, and this is a hard question, but what percentage of dogs do you think that actually helps out of the gate?
Most.
Most of them.
Hard Knocks Rescue and Training, when I was running it, our focus was on pulling those last chance dogs, the ones that would have been euthanized and for behavior reasons. And we maintained no kill numbers. Our live release rate was about 90%. We did have behavioral euthanasias, but those decisions came down to group discussions with at least one veterinarian, if not more, at least 2 trainers, if not more, other people that had been involved in caring for the dog. What are the things that we can do to minimize their impulse to bite? What are we doing that's kind of poking their boundaries? Are we reading their body language correctly? Other common sense things like, I'm going to be a little food aggressive if you reach into my plate. I'll probably stab you with my fork if you go for my French fries, right? So I'm not going to expect the dog, especially in a strange environment, to be cool with me just reaching in and taking things from them when they've already had everything taken from them.
All right, I want to get to that assessment test in a second, but then I want to go back to something you said, because you are taking, it sounds like 100% or close to 100% of dogs that have been assessed with behavior issues, probably aggression. These are animals that are on a kill list, but when you take them, and you're saving more than 90% of these animals. Not all dogs entering the shelter. The animals that enter the shelter were assessed as aggressive and are going to be killed if you don't take them. Is that correct? All right. I
Yes,
want to make sure that that's clear because it's a very
yeah,
important.
I
It's a very important number.
on it, but yes, a high percentage of the dogs that we pulled were that. We would get occasionally litters of puppies and things like that, which would kind of, mess with our behavior dog percentages, but
Sure.
our was taking behavior dogs, yes.
Okay. All right. That's important, right? Because right now there are shelters that are taking out of all their dogs, and 90% is the low water mark. We believe anyone can hit 90% in a regular shelter any day.
Oh.
They should be above that. That's the easy number to hit. It's that last 10% that you work a little harder for, which is what they're paid to do. So they should be working for, right? But when you're not taking that normal broad population and you're taking mostly the animals that are at risk, and you're still hitting those numbers, above those numbers, then that makes a big difference. But I want to ask you really quick about assessment, actually, or let you actually talk about assessment, because virtually any of the assessment tests out there, if you even the authors say this is not a test to see if we kill them or not. We're assessing to look at the animals. So talk about, tell me what you do with assessment, what it means.
Sure. So I don't go in with the fake hand on a stick or do anything like that, right? I'm going in with a baggie of hot dogs or some kind of high value treat. And I'm just spending time with the dog. Number one, do I feel safe personally walking up to the kennel, putting a leash on them and walking them to a meet and greet room or to an outdoor space? Okay. Are they going to let me do that? If they're cowered in the corner and they're hunkered down, I'm going to wait them out. If they're coming at me and they're really bitey, I'm going to walk away and I'm going to come back a couple of times and see, do they just have a little bit of like stranger danger because of the barrier, right? We're going to work on certain things like that. If I can get them outside, then I'm just going to sit out there and let them decide how much interaction we have. I'm not forcing myself on them. How do they respond at fences? Can I get them to disengage and come to me for a hot dog? If they do want to be engaged with me, how much can I get them to do? Can they sit? Do they shake? What are the things that they know how to do? Or do they just want to be pet and loved on? I let the dog kind of run the assessment. Okay.
So,
yeah, as long as I feel safe, then I'm not going to worry about, oh, well, they snapped at this person or they snapped at that person. I'm not a boundary pusher. If the dog lip licks and turns their head away, I know immediately they are saying no, thank you.
Gotcha. So correct me if I'm wrong, but the assessment is not about what's the future of this dog. The assessment is about how are we going to talk to this dog moving forward.
And we work together at all.
All right.
Does this dog have any desire to connect with me?
Right. Okay. All right. Super. This has been great, Lisa. I hope we have you back. I want to go for last thoughts. Alan, any last thoughts here?
Well, I think they're certainly interesting ideas. And, I think the whole approach that Lisa mentioned about having the dog dictate how the interaction goes, it makes me think of all the incidents you see in shelters where we see a dog supposedly bit or lunged at a staff member and we have to kill them. Well, I would bet that 90+% of those was because the staff member dictated the interaction with the dog rather than being patient, like Lisa mentioned, of letting the dog dictate what happened. So I think that is really interesting how she described that. But in general, I think, the numbers that Lisa mentioned really kind of mesh what we see at the best shelters. If she's pulling, let's say, the 10% of dogs at these shelters that they were going to kill, the last 10%, and she's saving 90% of that, you got 99% live dogs, which is really the best we've seen in animal control shelters across the country currently. So, it's really interesting to hear those numbers. So I think in general, this approach of just letting the dogs dictate the pace and and seeing how we're going to work with them is the way to go. And obviously the details of the training and behavior modification program are certainly another subject that I'm sure Lisa could talk hours about. But to me, it's just the general theme of letting the dogs determine how we're going to interact, I think is a really valuable key point that Lisa raised.
All right, Aubrie, last words.
I think that we have to stop expecting that a dog that ends up in an animal shelter is going to behave anything like what that dog's personality is really like. I mean, I've heard that a dog has the cognitive function of a toddler. So you can't expect the dog that you bring in maybe with a choke pull around its neck, highly stressful situation, put it in this concrete kennel, tall walls, maybe it's got a bed, but the dog probably initially doesn't care about the bed, all the barking, all the energy. We can't expect them to behave in a normal way. And what Lisa said about this, letting the dog dictate the flow, and Alan echoed, we've heard this before from Doug Ray at the Humane Society of Fremont County. I remember a story Doug told once about a dog named Forrest. And I did a blog about it where nobody else could go near this dog. And Doug was like, I'm not giving up on him. So Doug went in the first day in the kennel with a chair and sat there playing on his phone. Didn't even look at the dog. Just sat there, totally no eye contact. Acted like he couldn't care less about the dog. Then the next day he went in and he did the same thing, but he took some hot dog with him. It's amazing that hot dog is like the universal high value.
Oh yeah.
Food, right? Yeah. And he didn't he didn't look at the dog. He tossed him a couple slices of hot dog and he just sat there messing around on his phone, acted like he could care less about the dog. Then on the third day, it was just this slow thing. And ultimately Forrest came to him and was eating hot dog out of his hand. And even after Forrest ate hot dog out of his hand, he didn't try to touch Forrest. He came back the next day and Forrest came right up to him because they were building trust. They were developing a communication, right, in their own language. And Doug was being mindful of Forrest's body language. I mean, he knew about, the licking of the lips and the high held tail with the fast wag and, the ear position and stuff. And I think it was by the fourth day when he went in, Forrest came right up to him and not only wanted hot dog, but let Doug pet him. And
hey dude, how you doing?
He let Forrest dictate the flow. And that was only 4 days. And I'm not saying every dog can be handled that way in 4 days, but if you're expecting a dog to behave like a dog in someone's home and you're pushing and pushing and pushing and they, grab your arm or they won't make eye contact or they pancake on the floor, well, gosh, what do you expect? Lisa, I really would like to have you back on because I think that we could talk about we could talk about this for a long time. And I very much appreciate the fact that you've joined us today. I love this subject.
We absolutely do. And by the way, Doug is a friend of mine. I actually know Doug. He has an animal in his office almost, it's all the time. It's usually the one dog in the shelter that seems to be the biggest problem. He just moves Doug's office becomes the kennel. It's quieter. It's just the two of them, and he's not there all the time. And he's done that over and over again. That was particularly 4 days is actually a long time, Aubrie, because I know he's done a lot less because of what he does there. But Lisa, I'm going to give you the last word, and then we're going to cut out if you have anything to tell us.
I think that we need to be looking at our relationships with dogs as more cooperative, and that we need to remember that respect is earned and not taken. And I think it works with people, but it also applies to dogs. And if we can be just a little bit more cooperative with our approach to them, I think we could save a lot more.
All right, super. Lisa Maasen from Hard Knocks Rescue and Training. I'm Dave Smith from No Kill, Colorado. Aubrie Kavanaugh from No Kill, Huntsville. Alan Rosenberg from the New Jersey Animal Observer. This is No Kill in Motion. Thanks for joining us today.